yellow cards, but this was such an almost outrageous sort of one, and so enormously dangerous. Look, what was happening inside his head is an interesting issue. The fact is, in this particular one, it doesn't really matter. He may have been like the captain, having a little appeal to God during the game. Whatever the heck he was thinking doesn't matter. The fact is, what he did, Havili would have landed on his feet if Smith hadn't have interfered with him.
And that's the criterion, all right.
That's it, game, set and match, really, as far as that goes. It was, and look, even because if we think our commentators or Australian commentators get a bit carried away on television sometimes, even the South African commentators, guys like Joel Stransky, who South Africa could punch a guy in the face and he would say, well, the guy smashed his chin into the South African's fist. Even Joel Stransky said that, unfortunately, it had to be a red card.
All right. Does the city, Phil, need a new rugby stadium, or, as you put it in a recent column, the dream that dare not speak its name, as an urgent priority? Crusaders coach Scott Robertson says the city can't wait, but at the moment the construction's not expected to begin until 2022. What do you think?
Well, first of all, it needs a multi-purpose stadium, which the main tenant would be rugby, but it would not be an exclusive. It can't be. It must not be an exclusively rugby stadium. It has to be exactly like the Forsyth Bar Stadium in Dunedin, where they have everybody from Paul Simon to Elton John to Fleetwood Mac playing there. So that's number one. It has to be used and available for more than just rugby. But yes, rugby would be the main tenant. Second thing, way back in 2013, there was an agreement signed between central government and the Christchurch City Council. At the time, were headed by Bob Parker as the mayor, where they had 14 what they called anchor projects, which I thought was quite a good phrase to use. And since then, I'm delighted to say, because I was hesitant to write the column that I wrote in the weekend, because while I love Christchurch and I lived there for 11 years and I still have very close family and a lot of very dear friends living there, I was only a ratepayer for 11 years and we left before the earthquake, so I haven't lived through the trauma, although we regularly visit at least a couple of times a year. So I was reluctant to pass an opinion at all, but I do think this, and this, I only did it after I spoke with a large number of friends and family in Christchurch. I do really think this, that there are certain things that a city needs to make people that live in that city feel good. They are things like a library, they are things like a museum, they are things like an art gallery, they are things like, in Christchurch cases, getting its beautiful town hall restored. Now, all of those things are being done. Some of them are virtually finished, some of them have been finished in Christchurch. The one anchor project that for some bizarre reason has just been shifted from the A-list, as it was in 2013, to right at the back of the field, is a multi-purpose stadium that would be used for rugby but also for other things.
Where would you put it?
Well, they've already got the land.
I know. But
the central government has the land, and I think that's a perfect situation. It's very near the centre of the city. And mate, just very quickly too, if they started work on it tomorrow, it would be 2017. So it'd be 2022 before it was built. If they start in 2022, it won't be finished until 2027. That's 10 years from now. And the thing about the stadium at Addington, the former rugby league ground that they're using. Now, this cost doesn't occur every year, but last year they had to spend $1 million trying to upgrade it because it was never designed to be anything other than a temporary stadium.
Phil Gifford, thank you so much. We'll have more Christchurch Stadium discussions, I am sure. Alexia Russell, nice to have you on for your first time.
Thank you.
Come back again, won't you?
I will.
Tainui, thank you, Tainui. Always a pleasure.
Kia ora, Jim, bro. Nice to hear you both.
We are back tomorrow. Thanks for your company, everybody, and Checkpoint very shortly with John Campbell.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, Dunedin Hospital's orthopaedic surgeon set out at the Health Minister following his interview here with us on Checkpoint on Friday night. The surgeons say Jonathan Coleman has lowered staff morale by telling me on Friday the hospital is a cot case and the urology department toxic. We look at that in depth tonight. Mental health advocate Mike King says he was left speechless after a school's open letter to parents named and seemingly blamed a student who had committed suicide. Tom Walsh celebrates shot put gold at the World Athletic Champs. Emotions run high as the Christchurch Council has plans to rebuild Redcliffs School in a popular park. The McDonald scheme where employees can work and save to buy a house, and a 2,000 strong haka from Auckland Grammar for Sir John Graham.
This is Radio New Zealand News at 5. Dunedin Hospital surgeons want an apology from the Health Minister Jonathan Coleman. It's the latest step in deepening concerns about long waiting times for prostate treatment at the embattled Southern District Health Board. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
Dr Coleman told Checkpoint on Friday the board has enough funding to fix the unacceptable delays and must do so. He also said the hospital's urology department had been described to him as toxic. That's upset orthopaedic surgeons Simon McMahon and David Gwynne-Jones, who today circulated a letter they've sent Dr Coleman saying they're offended by his use of the word toxic, which they insist is untrue. They say he should apologise and tell ministry staff to get to the bottom of why the funding of their DHB is insufficient to meet need. They've also invited him to come and speak to them. Ko Karen Brown tēnei.
The brother of a murdered Christchurch woman says it will be tough to listen to the evidence against her when her murder accused is retried next month. Mallory Manning's body was found dumped in the Avon River in 2008. A former mongrel mob prospect, Moha Fawcett, was jailed for her murder 3 years ago, but his conviction has today been quashed and a new trial ordered for reasons that are suppressed. Miss Manning's brother, Robin Manning, says he will attend some of the hearing.
It's always tough. I think, like previously said, it's sort of worse than the worst horror film that you can think of. It's worse than that, or, some of the injuries that happened to her.
Robin Manning says others were involved in his sister's death. More than 4 times as many hot days a year are predicted for Wellington and Wairarapa by 2090, and Wellington can expect up to 15% more rain. A swathe of projections for how the warming climate will affect the lower North Island have come out today as part of a report commissioned by the Wellington Regional Council. Emile Donovan reports.
The NIWA report says Wairarapa is likely to go from 24 to 94 days annually, with temperatures above 25 degrees, while the Wellington number will rise from 6 to 26. More droughts are likely in Wairarapa, where 10% less rain is predicted. The council's chair, Chris Laidlaw, says due to a lack of direction from central government, it's time for local councils to take a lead on planning for climate change. He says there's a huge groundswell across the country with people demanding action. This is Emile Donovan.
The Mental Health Foundation has welcomed the government's decision to reconsider setting a target for reducing suicide rates. The sector wanted the government to adopt a goal of cutting the number of suicides by 20% over 10 years and criticised it last month when it adopted a more general aim of reducing suicide. The Foundation's Chief Executive Sean Robinson says setting a target will galvanise action.
It becomes, very much a courageous decision to say, yes, we are going to make a difference here. And it's really a very positive decision to say there are things we can do.
Sean Robinson of the Mental Health Foundation. The British captain of a log ship caught drunk at the wheel has been convicted and fined $3,000 in the Whangarei District Court. The master of the Shanxi, 53-year-old Anthony Michael Baker, was arrested on Friday after his ship berthed at Marsden Point. Local pilots who went on board were disturbed by his behaviour, smelled alcohol on him and called the police, who found he was more than 5 times over the legal alcohol limit. Maritime New Zealand says it's unlikely he'll work again as a skipper. The All Blacks manager has told a Sydney court he was shocked to discover a bugging device at the team's hotel last year. A long-serving All Blacks security consultant has denied fabricating claims about discovering an electronic bug at the hotel. Graham Acton reports.
Team manager Darren Shand said he noticed what looked like a battery and wires protruding from the foam of a chair in a meeting room at the Double Bay Intercontinental. The court heard the device was discovered when management decided to do a security sweep of the hotel and of the team's training ground in North Sydney. Security consultant Adrian Gard, who allegedly arranged for a security company to carry out the work, has pleaded not guilty to making up claims about finding the bug in the chair. This is Graham Acton.
And it's 5:04. To sport, and there's no place for Julian Savea in the 33-man All Black squad for this year's Rugby Championship Series. The selectors have named Rieko Ioane, Geordie Barrett and Nehe Milner-Scudder in the outside backs, along with the Chiefs utility Damien McKenzie. Chiefs prop Nepo Laulala and Ofa Tu'ungafasi from the Blues join the front row, and Vaya Fafita retains his place in the loose forwards. The first match of the series will be the Bledisloe Cup game in Sydney on August the 19th. New world shot put champion Tom Walsh says he kept waiting for his opponents to pull out a big throw and steal the competition from him. Walsh led for most of the competition in London this morning and was surprised his opponents didn't come back at him.
Everyone threw okay, but I guess that's a thing about the big stages, it puts pressures on you that normal, Diamond League comps don't. And I went into that circle not thinking I had it won on any throw. I wanted to keep throwing further, and it paid off with the last throw.
Silver Ferns coach Janine Southby has named 2 rookies and recalled tactics defender Te Malisi Whakahokotau for the upcoming quad netball series. The newcomers are the New Zealand under-21 shooter Monica Faulkner and Pulse mid-courter Whitney Souness. Southby says the intention is to give all 3 as much court time as possible.
World domination.
It's been a fantastic competition for Tom. Become the world champion. It's certainly the best achievement in his career today, and he certainly did it in style today.
Protection for tenants.
Given that we're going to have so many people now, tenants forever, we have to protect that sector.
Personality politics. Do you win a personality battle?
Well, yeah, I think I would actually. Not in the sense of, who's the coolest or the youngest, but in the sense of getting the job done as Prime Minister.
Yeah. The countdown is on. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espiner, weekdays from 6.
And then on 9 to noon, detecting skin cancer through smartphone apps. Do they work? And after 10, the Palmerston North-based enterprise that refurbishes wood for reuse. Join me, Lynn Freeman, and for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland, scattered rain clearing this evening, but returning tomorrow afternoon. Auckland and Coromandel, cloudy periods with patchy rain this evening, the odd shower tomorrow. Waikato to Taranaki, also Bay of Plenty in the central high country. Cloud increasing, patchy drizzle developing tonight, especially about high ground. Whanganui to Wellington, fine today, cloudy tomorrow with a few showers. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, but high cloud increasing tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine with increasing high cloud. However, scattered rain developing tomorrow afternoon or evening with heavy falls about northwest Nelson. Buller, Westland, Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain in Fiordland this afternoon, and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon with heavy falls. Southland, the odd shower turning to rain tomorrow afternoon. And the Chatham Islands, fine spells with any remaining showers clearing this evening. And that's the news and weather.
Rowan Quinn, who was minding her own business, a senior reporter in the newsroom upstairs, and then due to sickness stepped in and read the news magnificently. Thank you, Rowan. It's 5:08. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you so much for being with us. Coming up tonight, youth suicide and how not to respond to it. Christchurch's Redcliffs School, having fought to survive. It now has a new home, it seems, but also people who think it doesn't belong there, and how Auckland's traffic woes have suddenly found themselves blushing with all the attention they're getting, plus Timaru's Tom Walsh wins gold at the World Champs. But we begin tonight in Dunedin, where the Health Minister's appearance here on Checkpoint on Friday night has not, it seems, persuaded staff at the city's hospital that the Minister understands the stress they are under or that he has an answer for it. Checkpoint has been looking at the Southern DHB for the past fortnight, particularly Dunedin Hospital. On Friday, Health Minister Jonathan Coleman joined us for an extended interview that is available on our website. He rejected repeated claims from people we've spoken to, including senior staff at the DHB, that the biggest factor behind long waiting lists, cancelled operations and patients who have no idea when they're going to be treated for things as serious as heart disease and cancer is a lack of resources, and that the major answer to that is more money. Now, listening to Dr Coleman on Checkpoint on Friday were two orthopaedic surgeons who so strongly disputed the minister's take on what's happening at Dunedin Hospital that they wrote him a letter and CC'd it to us. They say they were offended by some of what Dr Coleman said. They speak of not being able to operate on people who need operations. They say nursing staff are under excessive stress. And they say, and I quote, financial performance has taken priority over clinical performance. We'll hear more from them shortly, but we begin tonight with what they were responding to.
The big picture is there is enough money there. The Commissioner's doing a good job. We're rebuilding the hospital, and actually surgeries have gone up by 33% over time and an extra nearly $250 million into the DHB. But performance needs to improve because patients come first.
They were Jonathan Coleman's final words on Checkpoint on Friday night. Big picture, relatively satisfied with performance, although with some qualifications. But in the 15 minutes that had preceded those closing words, the Health Minister wasn't always so glass half full.
It's unacceptable when people are not getting their surgery within the waiting times that they should.
That's on waiting times for prostate cancer treatment, and that widened out to the bigger picture.
Those people have to have their surgery. The public need to get the treatment that they deserve because there's plenty of money there. Just the management needs to get their act together to deliver services.
And that's the tension. In short, the Minister says the money is there and the issue is management and performance, while those we've spoken to in the DHB say the issue is resources. Too few staff, too few surgery hours, too few ICU beds. But the Minister repeatedly told us on Friday there is enough money.
Clearly the hospital has not been working as well as it could over some time, and it needs to turn around, but it's not a matter of money.
Not a matter of money. Now, that was Friday night. We began hearing from Dunedin Hospital staff as the interview was going to air. Their responses kept coming all weekend and have continued throughout the day today. Most have been in confidence, but one was very much on the record.
You know, I'm sure Dr. Coleman was under stress from the interview, and I suspect probably he regrets some of those comments, but they're out there, and I felt that we had to respond to them.
Simon McMahon is an orthopaedic surgeon at Dunedin Hospital, who's also a clinical lecturer in orthopaedics at the University of Otago. Not a man given to public protestation, but when he heard our interview with Jonathan Coleman on Friday night,
I thought that it was inappropriate for him to describe one of our departments as toxic.
Now, obviously, urology in Dunedin is a problem. It's been described to me today as a toxic department.
That was Jonathan Coleman himself responding to Checkpoint's investigations that revealed prolonged delays for prostate surgery at Dunedin Hospital. Now, we've spoken to patients, GPs, even the hospital's urologists themselves. All of them have said the delays were too long. The Health Minister responded,
they've got to sort their act out there. They've got to provide the radical prostatectomies, the urgent testing that people like those, you know, really good down-to-earth New Zealanders we've just heard from deserve and should get.
Right, so urology's a problem. Ophthalmology has been a problem in the past. You talked about people waiting for cardiac surgery. ICU is a problem. Tell me what parts of the hospital are going as you would like.
Look, the whole thing needs to improve. That's why we've put the Commissioner in. But this is a big, complex service.
2 years ago,
Come
Minister.
on, John. Look, you can't
2
go
years
like
ago,
that.
you sacked the board. You put in a Commissioner. You gave her financial KPIs, and she has halved the deficit. But as everyone we are talking to is saying is to us, at a cost.
No, John, look, the patient care comes first.
That's the intention, said Dr. Simon McMahon. And so frustrated was he that he and his colleague, fellow orthopaedic surgeon David Gwynne-Jones, wrote a letter to the Minister of Health, CCing it to Checkpoint. In part, they were upset by personal attacks on their colleagues.
He described one of our departments as toxic, and that isn't the case. They're a hard-working bunch of surgeons who actually don't have enough resources to do everything they need to do.
But for the most part, the McMahon-Gwynne-Jones letter is a kind of stocktake, the DHB's resources and the demands on them. And the letter's two authors are based in the orthopaedics department.
Every time we come to a clinic, we get presented with a big wad of referral letters we have to wade through to try and find someone who a general practitioner has referred to us who we think it doesn't need to come because, in fact, our limited capacity doesn't allow us to see them all.
So some patients, as would occur in any hospital of course, are considered below the thresholds for surgery, and then that is effectively that. But the McMahon-Gwyn-Jones letter says, and I quote, "Of those we think need an operation, we can only operate on about 2/3, which raises an obvious question. What happens to the other patients?
They get referred back to their general practitioner, and usually they simply get referred back.
So the GP refers a patient to the hospital agrees an operation is required but can't do it, so refers the patient back to the GP, who agrees an operation is required and refers the patient back to the hospital. But here's the KPI payoff to that kind of limbo. As the patients go back and forward, they're not on a waiting list.
The way it works, John, is if we put someone on the waiting list, if we don't get them done within 4 months, there's a financial penalty for the hospital. And so, the hospital can't afford to put people on the waiting list. We're not going to get done, otherwise our financial position will become even more difficult.
And the letter's co-author, fellow orthopaedic surgeon David Gwyn-Jones, says,
"We've been returning over 30% of patients, 370 patients over 2 years who need hip and knee replacements, and they're being returned to their GP to keep us compliant with the government targets. And, that's a huge number of very disabled patients that aren't getting their surgery."
Waiting lists, who's on them, who's not on them, how quickly are people getting surgery? On Friday, Jonathan Coleman told us,
if you look at the number of operations in Southern, they've increased by 33%.
Sounds good, and the Minister repeated the figure later in the interview. But the McMahon-Gwyn-Jones letter echoes what we've been repeatedly told off the record, that the boost to operation numbers includes large numbers of very quick and simple procedures.
If you count those as a procedure, then you'll be able to make up your numbers fairly promptly.
Indeed, the McMahon-Gwyn-Jones letter to the Minister calls the inclusion of such basic procedures as intraocular injections and facet joints injections amongst operation figures, and I quote, misleading. So, what's going on at Dunedin Hospital? Well, as you've heard, it depends on who you're talking to. The Minister, who sacked the board and appointed a commissioner to reduce the DHB's deficit, says the commissioner's doing a great job.
It's not a matter of money. The Commissioner's done a very good job. She has halved that deficit from 42 million to 21 million this year.
How did she halve the deficit?
It'll be 14 million this year.
How did she halve the deficit? That's
She's
the
actually...
You've given her financial KPIs, haven't
yep,
you?
But it's not at the expense of patient care. Patients come first.
Yes, they do, says Simon McMahon, but only if you're fortunate enough to actually be a patient. And under Jonathan Coleman's commissioner...
I don't have absolute figures on it, I'm sorry, but certainly our impression is that it's not improved and, in fact, even got worse.
That's Simon McMahon, orthopaedic surgeon, and the other orthopaedic surgeon that he wrote the letter with, David Gwyn-Jones. What's his message to Minister Jonathan Coleman?
I think he has prejudged the results of the urology review by labelling the department toxic. I think that's very disrespectful for the hard-working people within that department. And I think to bag the whole DHB as a cop case is hopeless for morale. It doesn't really help the issue at all. Health funding perhaps should be an election issue. I would like to see that there is equitable distribution of resources so that patients have an equal chance of getting their surgery wherever they live in the country.
That's David Gwyn-Jones, one of two orthopaedic surgeons who heard our interview with Jonathan Coleman on Friday night and wrote to the Minister in response, CCing a copy of the letter to us. It's 18 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Mental health advocate Mike King says he was left speechless after a school sent out a letter to parents last week naming and effectively, seemingly blaming a student for committing suicide. Mr. King says the school acted on its own with its own template outside Ministry of Education guidelines. He says the letter was careless and implied children at the school would be ostracised for speaking up about suicidal thoughts. This comes as the government reconsiders setting a goal of reducing suicide rates by 20% over 10 years as part of a new prevention strategy. I spoke with Mike King this afternoon and I asked him to read me the first 2 paragraphs of the school's letter.
3rd of August 2017. Dear parents and caregivers, last night so-and-so, a Year 11 student, took her own life. This is an irreversible and unacceptable choice that she has made, and one that, along with her family and friends, we are deeply saddened about.
Right, Mike King, what is wrong with that letter?
Well, first off, they named the child. Second off, they called it a suicide. Only the coroner is allowed to rule on things like that. And third off, it's victim blaming. They've turned around and they have ostracised this young lady. They have shamed her and her family in front of the entire community. It is the only thing that is unacceptable is this letter.
Do you understand whether or not the school approached the family and said, we're going to send this letter out?
I have no idea. I don't, but I don't. I honestly don't. Look, here's the thing. I know the school's intention would have been good, but the delivery was absolutely appalling. And I have since I posted that letter, I've spoken with the Ministry of Education.
Who said what?
And they assured me that it is not their template. It is not something they encourage. I have since posted their template of a letter. They said that they reached out to the school and offered assistance, and they were rebuffed. They are going to speak to the school again today.
This speaks once again, and there have been years and years and years now of these discussions, of our ad hoc, unprepared, unrehearsed inability to get something that works as a formal response to suicide, doesn't it?
Well, what it does is it reinforces society's, my generation's, judgmental attitude towards young people. The assumption was immediately that this young lady had made an unacceptable choice. She was a naughty girl, and we should be protective of all of that. And she's actually, like the inference of the letter is, she is actually put other lives at risk by making that decision. And it's that judgmental attitude that my generation has towards young people, which is preventing them from talking to us. It is preventing them from coming forward and asking for help. Now, here's what we know, John. 40% of kids in schools will have a suicidal thought before they leave school, whether it's a one-off fleeting thought or whether it's a recurring thought that grinds them down on a daily basis. Now, this is just a normal part of being a human being. We have all questioned our mortality at some stage in our lives, and if you haven't, you seriously need help. Now, having a one-off thought is just a normal part of being human. Having a recurring thought, we all agree that it's time that you reached out and asked for help. But here's the stat that everyone should be really terrified about. 80% of kids who have recurring thoughts of suicide never ask for help, ever. Why? Because they're worried about what other people will think, what other people will say, and what other people will do with that information. They are also extremely worried, in a lot of cases, about hurting their parents. I've spoken to so many kids, and I said, why can't you talk to your parents? You love them, they love you. I don't want to hurt them. They have done everything for me. They don't deserve this. So it is fear. It is fear of what we are going to say and what we are going to do. So what I have learned over the last 4 years is our kids aren't the problem, John. We are the problem. Our generation is the problem. We must all look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what are we doing to prevent our young people, who we love more than anything in the world, what are we doing to prevent them from coming to us and opening up and having these discussions?
Who gave this letter and why? What was their concern? Was their response similar to yours? And did they want you to articulate precisely the stuff that you're now saying?
4 parents and a student.
4 parents and a student. 4 parents and a student.
4 parents and a student emailed me the letter on Friday. and Facebook messaged me the letter. And like them, I was dumbstruck. Normally I have a response. I mean, I sat on it for the whole weekend. I sat there with my wife, and we just stared at each other, and just going, what the hell is our world coming to? I mean, that letter sends a clear message to any young people in that community that you cannot have these thoughts, and if you do have them, you can't talk to us. What that letter should have said was, have the discussion with your children. This tragic event took place. Love your children. There'll be so many kids in that school who knew that girl that will be feeling guilty. They'll be worried that they could have done something, they should have done something. We need to all love these children and remind them that they did their best.
Mike King, mental health advocate, 5:25. We would love your feedback tonight on the Southern DHB and what's going on at Dunedin Hospital, and of course on this country's handling of and response to youth suicide. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, you can text us 2101, and you can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Let's move on to some sports news, and it's good news. Timaru shot putter Tom Walsh has celebrated his gold medal at the World Athletics Champs in London with a beer and a burger. Walsh threw a best of 22.03 metres with his last throw, but he had to wait more than an hour for confirmation of his win after American Joe Kovacs appealed a foul on his final throw. Our sports editor Stephen Hewson asked Tom Walsh what he was thinking about during his last couple of throws.
Look, all I thought was, mate, I was still trying to throw further. I was still trying to stick to my processes and things that have been working for me recently, and really get behind one, and because I thought that the other boys would have for sure, but they didn't. But I managed to pull one out on the last throw as well, which is something pretty cool. Yeah, and so it's just an amazing feeling, mate, being world champ.
Kovacs and his appeal, a nervous few minutes there.
Well, yeah, it was more than minutes. It was probably like about an hour and a half after the event. I heard that I didn't, that I had it, which is pretty cool. But it was a weird kind of hour and a half, not knowing whether it was yes or a no.
Have you spoken to him?
Yes, yeah, we've had a chat, and look, he was well within his right to do it, and I would have done the same thing as well. So, that's the sport, that's the way it is. But they reviewed it and they decided that it was still a foul, so here we are.
Now, you've obviously timed your run right. You talked about your build-up and everything and how it was going, and that you pretty much thought you were on the money. Some suggestion you might have had a bit of an injury issue during the week?
Yeah, last training session on Friday I managed to tweak my groin on the third throw of the session, so wasn't exactly the best build-up, but look, well, it was a great build-up until the last training session, and then there was a little bit of, panic, but we managed it really well, and that was a great thing with the support team that's here for the Athletics New Zealand team.
It didn't bother you through the throwing?
Oh no, look, it's sore. That's one thing for sure. But I thought, look, I've come this far. It would be silly for me not to try and give it a go at least.
And you mentioned there, I mean, you must have been waiting for Kovacs or for Krauser to sort of join the competition, but that never really happened.
No, look, it was like everyone threw okay, but I guess that's a thing about the big stage is, it puts stresses and pressures on you that normal, Diamond League comps don't. And for him, for those guys to not actually come back, but I guess Joe did come back on his last throw, but it was just a foul. So, look, as I said earlier, I went into that circle not thinking I had it won on any throw. I wanted to keep throwing further, and it paid off with the last throw.
Do you get a chance to celebrate now?
Just on the way now, finished the media stuff and all that kind of things, and now off to see my family who's here, my girlfriend and a few other supporters at a bar, and we'll have one or two pints and a feed as well, because I'm a bit toey for a feed.
What's going to be for a feed? What are you looking forward to?
I'm not sure, mate. Anything, burgers, some steak, I don't know, anything, mate. Anything that goes on the plate.
And did you get a conversation with your uncle? Because he had a word or two to say to you after Rio, didn't he?
The old second loser thing. No, look, I haven't had a chance to chat to him yet, but you know, I'm sure he'll come up with something that I've done wrong.
Tom Walsh, gold medal winner at the World Champs, talking to our sports editor, Stephen Hewson. Auckland's commuters are sending a clear message to politicians of all stripes about the city's traffic woes, and that message is get on with it. National and Labour both unveiled their transport plans for Auckland over the weekend. Labour wants to fast-track light rail to the airport and West Auckland as part of a transport package to be partly funded by a regional fuel tax. Meanwhile, National is pledging to electrify the railway line between Papakura and Pukekohe south of Auckland City and start building a third main line between Wiri and Westfield. Our reporter Sarah Robson and videographer Claire Eastham Farrelly went to find out what transport users think.
Kavita is a big user of Auckland's trains. She catches the train from her home out west in New Lynn to Newmarket every day.
Basically, it's 15 minutes if I go from here to New Lynn. Yeah, so it's quite considered. So I prefer to taking train or something like that.
So that's actually quicker than driving?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, saving time and plus you don't have to go and look for the car parks and things like that. And so, yeah.
So the train system works pretty well for you, doesn't it?
Yes, it is perfect.
Cherie and Lee are stopping off in Newmarket on their way back to Middlemore from the CBD. They agree that catching the train is something they should be doing more often.
We were actually just talking and saying how convenient it is and that it saves things like parking and worrying about the stress of city traffic and things like that. So we're talking about maybe doing it a little bit more often.
If I'm going into the city during the week, I never drive because parking's horrendous and you have to make sure that you leave before or after rush hour. If I go in the weekend, I'll drive because parking's cheaper, but no, the trains are good during the week.
But Cherie and Lee say there's definitely room for improvement, and the fact there's no light rail option to the airport leaves a gaping hole in Auckland's public transport network.
There definitely needs to be better public transport out to the airport. I think it's ridiculous that it's our main airport of New Zealand and you have to either get a bus or a taxi out there. I think there's a need for it now. I think why even wait 10 years? Do it sooner.
Out at the airport, we asked people who had just arrived in Auckland how they were thinking about getting into the city.
Normally we would have family members come pick us up because sometimes it's quite hectic to get onto public transport.
The Skybus is the plan. Normally I get a taxi if I'm up for work, and it's all right, but it's a bit expensive for holidays and stuff, yeah.
I thought about public transport, but I guess it was sort of, probably a bit more of a hassle, and I didn't really feel like waiting around.
One thing they all agreed on was that there should be light rail between the airport and the city.
I've travelled a bit in Japan and stuff, and the subways and light rail there is awesome. It's cheap, runs really well, it's reliable, and dodges all the traffic.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I think more people should take public transport, and I think a train, if it's faster, will be better for people to use. Yeah.
100%. I love train travel as well. It's nice to just sit there and look out the window and chat if you like, or have that quiet time instead of stressing out in traffic.
But who should pay for these improvements to Auckland's public transport network? Labour wants a regional fuel tax, which means Aucklanders would pay a bit more to fill up their cars. However, these people from the region seemed happy to chip in.
Probably benefits the country as a whole, people that travel up here, and it would ease up congestion and reduce costs, I guess, for the NZTA and things like that on the motorways and things there on the other infrastructure. So
you wouldn't be opposed to chipping in a little bit?
No, probably not. Council and the rest, it would be good.
Well, I think we all have to pay for it, don't we? So taxes and the government basically.
If you want to live in Auckland, then maybe you should have to pay a little bit more, but then Auckland's sort of the economic hub of the country, so maybe the rest of New Zealand should contribute too.
But Aucklanders aren't so sure that's fair.
If I live down in Gore, I wouldn't want to pay for Auckland, so I don't think the whole country should. But perhaps we can, people that use that transport, like if they did a light rail out to the airport, those, tax through the ticket system or something, because people that use it should pay for it, but not people that don't.
I feel like we do pay a fair bit in taxes already, but I do feel like there needs to be improvement to Auckland transport. So, we do have to come up with the money.
Labour has pledged to fast-track light rail to the airport in West Auckland within a decade. National says while light rail to the airport is a good idea, it's not a priority right now. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up before 6 o'clock, emotions run high as the Christchurch Council has plans to rebuild Redcliffs School. Boy, they've had a tough few years in a popular park. The McDonald scheme where employees can work and save enough to buy a house, a 2,000-strong haka, as Auckland grammar students farewell Sir John Graham. Nona has business news next, but before all of that, Rowan Quinn with the headlines.
Thanks, John. Dunedin Hospital surgeons have gone public to express their dismay at remarks by the Health Minister Jonathan Coleman. Long waiting times for prostate treatment at the embattled Southern District Health Board led Dr Coleman to tell Checkpoint the hospital's urology department had been described to him as toxic. That's upset orthopaedic surgeons at the hospital who want him to now apologise. The Mental Health Foundation is welcoming the government's announcement that it will reconsider setting a target for reducing the suicide rate. The Health Minister Jonathan Coleman says he now believes a target could help rally mental health workers and society. Mental health experts say setting a target has been extremely successful overseas. The British captain of a log ship caught drunk at the wheel has been convicted and fined $3,000 in the Whangarei District Court. The 53-year-old master of the Shanxi was arrested on Friday after his ship berthed at Marsden Point and local pilots became disturbed by his behaviour. Mental health advocate Mike King is criticising a school that sent out a letter to parents last week which named and blamed a student for committing suicide. Mr King's told Checkpoint while the school's intentions may have been good, the delivery was appalling. He says the judgmental attitude in the letter is what prevents young people from asking for help. 70 more hot days a year are predicted for the Wairarapa in the next 100 years, and people in Wellington can expect up to 15% more rain. Projections for how the warming climate will affect the lower North Island have come out today as part of a report commissioned by the Wellington Regional Council. The council says due to a lack of direction from central government, it's time for the local councils to take a lead on planning for climate change. And that is the headlines.
Thank you very much indeed, Ron. See you again in about 23 minutes. Goodness gracious. Business news with Nona Peltier, who's on the other side of me, also having descended the stairs from the excellent Auckland newsroom above us. What's going on, Nona? Expectations, the upcoming reporting season?
Yes.
They're a bit negative, aren't they?
They are, but that's partly because we are at a record high level. So even today, we broke another record.
So this is gravity, is it?
Well, it's like this. If you've got a property and it's an investment or whatever it is, and it's fully valued, your expectations are that it's going to perform at that level, right? And if it doesn't, it's going to disappoint. So there's a lot of downside risk.
Right. So, but you're talking about company reporting, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so.
But some of them are properties, and some of them are.
Okay.
Some of them are retailers, and some of them are building companies, like Fletcher Building, for example. It's casino operator.
So, whose expectations are we talking about? Shareholders, the companies themselves?
Well, analysts have been looking at it. So we had what they call the confession season that led up to the reporting season, which we're now in. And in the confession season, we heard that Fletcher Building had, marked down their forecast by a couple $100 million, not a small amount. And of course, we also heard from Sky that they were going to spend more on their Adelaide casino, and they had marked down the value of their Darwin casino. So these are the things that we hear in the lead up. We also heard from Steel and Tube that warned that their forecasts were going to be down. Yeah, so that's what they call the confession season.
And the market hates surprises.
Right.
So the confession season prepares people for the actual result season, which is almost upon us.
It's upon us, believe me. We're heading right into it. Over the next few weeks, we're going to hear from 43 companies, and only 11 of them are expected, according to Forsyth Barr, to report profit increases of more than 10%. The median expectation is 5%. So 2 for every 1 are expected to report an improved profit. but then there's still going to be some that are definitely going to disappoint, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Thanks, Nona.
So anyways, we'll be bringing all that news to you over the next few weeks. In the meantime, our top 50 index, it rose 1/3%, believe it or not, by 25 points to almost 7,772. That's a new record. We're getting awfully close to 8,000, aren't we?
Yeah, but that explains why there is increasing sort of caution and anxiety about right how much.
It's like how much are these companies really worth?
Yeah.
Our dollar is steady at 74 cents US, 93.2 Australian, and 56.7 pence, and that's partly because there's still political turmoil in the United States. So even though they're having quite good economic indicators at the moment, there's still a lot of unease about their policies and, you know, just the general direction there, which is holding back the US dollar at the moment. And so that's holding up ours. However, we are expecting to hear from the Reserve Bank later in the week on inflation data, and we're expecting them to say that the dollar is too high, so we're more likely than not to go down. Who could say?
Who can say? Nona
We'll
Peltier,
find out.
Thank you very much. Confession season is a good new phrase. I like that. Thank you. Some private tertiary institutions are cutting ties with three men believed to be controlling a large part of the multi-million-dollar Indian student market, and multi-million dollars an understatement. An Immigration New Zealand document from January says the men are highly likely to be operating a network of agents in India to recruit students, and sources in the Indian community here have told Immigration that one of the men has significant control over the industry, which has been plagued by controversies over visa fraud and substandard courses. As education correspondent John Gerritsen reports, tertiary institution leaders say it's hard to know who to trust.
The Immigration New Zealand document says the three men might be contributing to a high number of poor quality student visa applications. Two have told RNZ News the allegations are untrue, and Immigration admits some of its information is anecdotal. But Christine Clark from Independent Tertiary Education New Zealand, which represents most private tertiary institutions, says some members have already decided it's not worth dealing with the men.
I have had confirmed that there have been quite a few involved in the past who have now, because of discussions from Immigration New Zealand, have stopped using these people. But they were exploiting the sector absolutely dreadfully, and I think that is the issue.
Christine Clark says she's been told the men were charging commissions as high as 60% of the fees paid by students. She says it's hard for institutions to find reliable agents to recruit students from India.
Well, it's actually really quite difficult because you hear of an agent who's really, really good. Well, you are told they're really, really good. You go to other organisations and say, you know, have you heard of them? Do you believe they're good? And they lie to you. And they say, yep, they're fine. And then you find out in actual fact they weren't. They're really dodgy.
Paul Anderson from the Auckland Hotel and Chefs Training School also says it's difficult to know who to trust.
We have to go on trust with a lot of agents. And some of those great agents that we've had in the past have turned out to be not so great. So it's very hard for us to find a person in the industry or an agent within the industry that doesn't fall into some of those pitfalls that have been recognised by RNZ.
Paul Anderson says one option for cleaning up the market is to cap the maximum commission paid to recruitment agents.
Capping would be good if we started to look at agents' commission rates being capped throughout New Zealand. Agents will be looking for providers that are delivering great courses rather than great commission rates. So I think that's one of the things that should be reviewed.
Independent Tertiary Education New Zealand says it will discuss the possibility of a voluntary cap with its members, but admits that might stop the slowing but still large flow of students from India. Last year there were 28,000 Indian students who studied in New Zealand. Steve McGill from Immigration New Zealand won't elaborate on immigration's concerns about the three men, but says protecting the reputation of the education system is hugely important.
There are big returns for New Zealand. There are thousands of New Zealanders employed in this industry. It's our fifth biggest export, and where there is individuals or companies or students who damage that reputation, then the appropriate action needs to be taken.
Steve McGill says institutions that use a large number of student recruitment agents are often those who have a lot of study visa applications declined. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
Somewhere in the region of 2,000 students farewelled former All Blacks captain and educator Sir John Graham with a rousing haka after his funeral in Auckland today. Hundreds of mourners packed the Holy Trinity Cathedral in Parnell to remember Sir John, who died last Wednesday at the age of 82 from cancer. And as Jessie Chang reports, students from Auckland Grammar performed the first ever whole school haka for the former headmaster.
Sir John Graham was described as an inspiring teacher and leader by those who paid their respects at his funeral service today. His granddaughter, Kate Connolly, said it was overwhelming to see how many people admired her grandfather. She said his legacy and what he stood for would live on.
In these last few weeks, you told me you were content. You knew you had done what you needed to do, and now you have left us at a loss. But Papa, I can assure you, the wisdom in your voice and the things you have taught us bridge the gap between life and death. You will live on, and that is the sign of a great man.
His former colleague Nigel Evans spoke of Sir John being a benevolent dictator while he was headmaster at Auckland Grammar School. Mr Evans said the man, known to many simply as DJ, was firm, but it was indisputable that he cared about people.
His mentoring inspired countless individuals to change their lives for the better, set new directions and reach goals that they previously thought unattainable.
Former Prime Minister Sir John Key said the former president of the New Zealand Rugby Union lived life to the fullest and had an impact on many, including himself.
He was instrumental in some of my thinking around education policy, and I was lucky to have him give me some support and guidance in a number of areas. So at a personal level, I had enormous respect for Sir John.
Sir John Graham was outspoken and said New Zealanders focused excessively on rugby instead of social issues such as poverty and unemployment. He was also critical of the 1981 Springbok tour of New Zealand, declining to attend any matches. Former All Blacks coach Sir Graham Henry said while Sir John achieved more in his life than most people, his major love was teaching. He says Sir John was one of the most influential men in his life and helped him to achieve things he didn't think he was capable of.
Just by connecting with him, he added to your life and changed your life. He gave you opportunities to get better and gave you the support to get better. So I can't speak highly enough of the man. I love him, man love, hugely, and I'll miss him terribly.
After the service, about 2,000 boys from Auckland Grammar performed a first ever whole school haka for Sir John outside the church. They said their former headmaster left a lasting impact on them.
Sir John was an absolute grammar legend, and he did so much not only for the grammar but also for New Zealand as a whole.
I saw his grandson, spoken to him. It's a very, very sad day for Auckland Grammar, but a great opportunity to celebrate all that he's given to New Zealand and Auckland Grammar.
He's left a lasting legacy on the school, and a lot of the sort of initiatives that he implemented in the school still live on today.
Sir John is survived by his wife Sheila and his 3 children and 4 grandchildren. For Checkpoint, for Jessie Chang, TNA.
There's a seriously stirring haka. We'll play it as much as we can of it just before the end of the program tonight at about 6:28, 6:29. The All Blacks manager has told a Sydney court he was shocked to discover a bug had been planted in the team's Sydney hotel last year. Darren Shan was giving evidence via a video link as part of the police's case against the team's security consultant, Adrian Gard. Now, Gard has pleaded not guilty to making up claims about finding the bug secreted in a chair in the team's meeting room last August. ABC reporter Jen Browning is covering the hearing, set down for 2 days in the Downing Centre Local Court in Sydney, and I asked her, Jen Browning, what the prosecution is alleging.
Well, basically, the charge is that Adrian Gard made a false report to police that a bug had been found. So it's not that he planted the bug or who planted the bug, but just about this false claim. Now, 15 witnesses have been called to this case. The first this morning was the All Blacks team manager, Darren Shan. Now, he said he was called to Mr Gard's room on the Monday night, August 15th, prior to that Bledisloe Cup opener last year, and shown 2 chairs, one of which had some wires and a battery sticking out of some foam. Now, he said they then let security at the hotel know. They went on to involve 2 investigators, and it wasn't until Friday when it was made known to them that it could be a criminal case that Steve Chu and some other officials were brought in. And then on game day, August 20th, that was the day that they decided to hand the matter over to police. Of course, we know the All Blacks thrashed the Wallabies in that game. And it all came to light in the hours leading up to that opening Bledisloe Cup match. So it's very interesting, no doubt. It's got a long way to go. Coincidentally, the All Blacks and Wallabies are back in camp at the moment in the lead up to this week's Bledisloe Cup opener.
Yes, and the Wallabies were, I think, really upset about the inference that they played any role in planting some kind of listening device in the All Blacks room. It's not being alleged that a listening device was planted in the All Blacks room. What's being alleged is that Adrian Gard made the whole thing up and presented the listening device as evidence of something that hadn't actually happened.
It'll be interesting once he finally gets quizzed. We've just heard from Charles Carter, who was actually a sweeping bug specialist who was called in because the All Blacks wanted someone with more state-of-the-art equipment to sweep the hotel, as it was a new hotel and given a lot of things that are going on in the world. So Charles Carter runs a bugging specialist organisation, and he was brought in because the All Blacks, he said, had a security scare in South Africa, and they weren't taking anything lightly anymore. He said he did a sweep of the team's strategy room, which was in the ballroom in the hotel in Double Bay, and he found 2 questionable chairs. Now, because he was contracted by the All Blacks, not the hotel, he said he didn't want to open those chairs. He alerted Mr. Gard, who then took matters maybe into his own hands. And he left the chairs with Mr. Gard, and then this is where it's all come out. So we're not sure when the bugs were found or how they were planted, if it was an old bug. He said sometimes his equipment can find a bug in a wall that's been dead for 8 years, but it's still transmitting things. So there's a lot of speculation. It's a circumstantial case. It's a lot of hearsay, he said, she said. So no doubt this is going to unfold. But as I said, Adrian Gard is not charged with planting a device. He's just charged with making a false statement to police about a bug being found.
That's Jen Browning from the ABC talking to us from outside the court. A plan to rebuild a Christchurch school on a popular park has outraged some residents. Redcliffs School was forced out of the seaside suburb after the huge cliffs behind it collapsed in dramatic fashion during the June 2011 earthquake, sending massive boulders crashing onto its back fields. While the community is relieved the school is finally returning, some people are upset it's at the expense of its park. Colin Young reports from an emotional council hearing.
The park is currently owned by the Christchurch City Council, which is now deciding whether to accept a land swap deal with the Ministry of Education. The council would be given the site of the old school, which it intends to turn into a park, and in return the ministry would be given the park where the new school would be built. As part of its deliberations, the council is holding hearings. Before making his submission today, one of those opposed to the deal, resident Chris Dordney, told me the old school site was still the best place to have a school. He says the park is too low-lying and too close to the sea.
The lower level floods, a tsunami would affect the Redcliffs Park site, a medium-small one that is, not the sort of Japanese type. It wouldn't really affect the existing school site at all.
Another resident, Simi Desor, says after 6 years without one, everybody in Redcliffs wants its school back. She says many are backing the park site because they believe not doing so will risk the school not being built at all. But she says the community should not let the Ministry of Education force them into accepting something they're not completely happy with.
A lot of people want to save the school, as do we, you know. It's really important, and we've been bullied. We've been bullied by the ministry and the minister to shut up and put up, because otherwise we'll lose the school, and we shouldn't be put in that position because it's not one or the other, it should be both.
Redcliffs School Principal Rose McInerney made an emotional plea to the hearings panel today to do the deal with the ministry. Holding back tears, she said opposing the park location would further delay the school's return.
After 6 years, we are proud to have retained our staff, but attracting new enrolments is becoming increasingly difficult as time rolls on. It will be another 2 years before the school is built, all going well. We do not have the strength or the energy for any more delays.
Rose McInerney says the deal is a win-win for the community, which will not only get a replacement park on the site of the old school, but a school with facilities everybody would be able to use.
We are excited about the potential. Our preliminary brief for the school design includes shared community facilities, accessible playgrounds, sports fields, even a community veggie garden. If there are concerns, we can work towards solutions.
Student William Jones was clear about what was at stake.
Looking through the submission report, there is an overwhelming support for the land swap, 71%. The minister listened to what the people were saying last year and decided to keep our school open. I am told that the Minister of Education will not change her mind about the site, so we must accept the change of site or we could lose our school.
The Ministry of Education says the disruption caused by having to close the school following further earthquakes so the stability of the cliff could be checked would be too disruptive, and the old school site was therefore off the table. If the council approves the park site, the new school would be open by mid-2019. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Konanyang tēnei.
Let's head south from Christchurch to Dunedin. Saving up money for a house or study or anything that costs a lot isn't easy for people on low income, so one Dunedin employer has come up with a way to help their staff save. Justin and Etere Stonelake, who own the city's 3 McDonald stores, are investing their own cash into a staff savings scheme to give them, well, a little something back. Our reporter Lydia Anderson paid them a visit.
The Stonelakes are passionate about helping people. They worked their way up for 2 decades at the company before taking over the Dunedin franchise 5 years ago, where they set about sponsoring community projects. But this year, husband Justin says they realised they wanted to help their own employees. So the Stonelakes started a staff savings scheme.
It's just tough. It really is tough for some. And they're in predicaments where, they could be 40 years old and they could still be flatting and they could still have all the issues that go with flatting. And hopefully this will, give them the impetus to just save.
Full-time workers who've worked at the company for over a year can join to put a little aside each week, and the Stonelakes will contribute at least $5,000 when they choose to cash in on the scheme. They also receive a pay rise and regular hours for being part of the scheme. Justin says they started it with the intention of helping staff save up for study, but then realised their older staff in particular had more pressing needs.
We've got kids, we understand the pressures of life and and trying to get into a house, and in some parts of New Zealand you just can't do that. Whereas in Dunedin, that's a dream that can be made real, and that's hence why we tried to make this happen.
His wife Etere says their staff work hard for them, so she gets a buzz out of recognising their effort.
It's that heart-warming, fuzzy knowing that you're helping a mum or a dad or people that couldn't afford otherwise to get into a home and know that it's theirs. That's what makes this program worthwhile. It's not, getting our name out there or, people go, you're just beeping your own horn. It's not like that at all.
The nest egg can be used alongside KiwiSaver and government housing grants. Worker Tash Watterston says the scheme's initial focus on study wasn't for her, but Justin made it work.
I'm 40, I've got 5 kids, and I'm like, studying just isn't my decision, not for me. And he's like, well, do you have your own house, Tash? And I was like, no, I'm renting. And he's like, would you like to own your own house? I'd love to. It's like, well, how about instead of studying, you save for your own home? It's like, that would be awesome.
She says the Stonelakes have thrown her a lifeline.
They're like a lifesaver. I can't say there's any other bosses out there that would do this for their staff, crew, however they see their employees. It's a big, big decision to make, and giving us the opportunity, that shows how much trust they have in us as well.
Fellow worker Hayley Bomford has just joined the scheme and says she also wants to buy a house. She moved to Dunedin from Auckland 2 years ago and says it's the first time she's been able to think about home ownership.
You know, it's almost like growing up knowing that you're never going to be able to afford that, and then you go into the renting market and then you're just stuck renting and you can't afford to buy your own home.
The Stone Lakes have so far contributed $350,000 towards the scheme, but say as it keeps growing, they'll keep giving. And Dunedin for Checkpoint, Lydia Anderson.
1 minute before Rowan is here with the news at 6. Lots of feedback again on the Southern DHB Dunedin Hospital. Dear John, good work in investigating the Southern DHB. Perhaps you might like to inquire about the length of waiting lists for MRI scans. After waiting for 3 months for a response from the radiology department to the referral from my orthopaedic surgeon, I've been informed that the estimated wait for your appointment is 40 weeks. An appointment will be scheduled and sent to you at a later date. The letter was dated in May. To date, I've received no appointment date. The letter goes on to state, quote, if you would prefer to access your scan through a private provider, please discuss this with the doctor who referred you. Private MRI imaging is available in Dunedin. If you do seek private services, we would appreciate you advising us. The scan is to investigate the source of acute back pain. If I could afford the approximate $2,000 cost, I could get one done within 4 weeks. When did our public hospital system become user pays? That from Laurie. Thank you for all your feedback tonight. We're coming up to 6 o'clock. Let's listen to the pips.
Radio New Zealand News at 6. I'm Rowan Quinn. Just breaking news here that 2 Green MPs are threatening to resign if Metiria Ture does not quit as co-leader. Kennedy Graham and David Clendon say her position on benefit fraud means she's no longer fit to be the co-leader and she must stand down immediately. A senior surgeon at Dunedin Hospital wants the Health Minister to apologise for critical remarks about the hospital's urology department. 10 patients have waited for 7 months for further surgery or investigations for prostate cancer at the Southern District Health Board. In a long-awaited interview on Checkpoint on Friday, Jonathan Coleman said the department had been described to him as toxic. Orthopaedic surgeon David Gwynne-Jones says he and others at the hospital were disappointed and offended by that.
He has prejudged the results of the urology review by labelling the department toxic. I think that's very disrespectful for the hard-working people within that department. And I think to bag the whole DHB as a cop case is hopeless for morale.
David Gwynne-Jones says the DHB has been penalised by the population-based funding formula. A relief carer for the elderly who's paid $3 an hour has lost a Supreme Court battle to be paid the minimum wage. Janet Lowe fills in for primary carers looking after disabled and elderly people. Laura Tupou reports.
Ms Lowe argued that as a relief carer she was a home worker under the Employment Relations Act and therefore an employee of the Ministry of Health or District Health Board. The Employment Court ruled in her favour in March 2015, but the ruling was later overturned by the Court of Appeal. In a decision released today, the Supreme Court says Ms Lowe was not directly employed by the Ministry or a DHB. Her work was arranged through the primary carer. Ms Lowe's lawyer Peter Craney says 30,000 women are in a similar position and outside the usual employment system. Ko Laura Tupou aho.
And just back to our lead story that 2 Green MPs are threatening to resign if Metiria Ture does not quit as co-leader. Kennedy Graham and David Clendon say her position on benefit fraud means she is no longer fit to be a co-leader and she must stand down immediately.
Mrs Ture has admitted to lying to work and income during the 1990s while on a benefit and to registering on the electoral roll at another person's address despite not living there. The 2 MPs say those admissions and her continued justification of her actions mean they can no longer stay on under her leadership. They say they do not believe that lying to a public agency can ever be condoned. Dr Graham and Mr Clendon want a new leader alongside James Shaw to lead the party into the September election. They say say if Mrs Today does not step down, they cannot support the Greens' 2017 campaign and will withdraw as candidates from the list and from their electorates. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
Mental health advocate Mike King is criticising a school that he says sent a letter to parents last week naming and blaming a student for committing suicide. Mr King says he doesn't know if the school approached the family before the letter was sent. He says while the school's intentions would have been good, the delivery was appalling.
They've turned around and they have ostracised this young lady. They have shamed her and her family in front of the entire community. It is the only thing that is unacceptable is this letter.
Mike King says he contacted the Ministry of Education about the letter and it told him this was something that it did not encourage. He says the judgmental attitude demonstrated in the letter is what prevents young people from asking for help. Kiwi fruit growers believe the government had a duty of care to protect them from biosecurity risks, including the vine-killing disease PSA. A group is suing the Ministry for Primary Industries for negligence, saying it let the disease into the country in 2009. Its lawyer, Davy Salmon, has told the High Court in Wellington the ministry was in the best position to defend the billion-dollar industry and it had a duty of care. Mr Salmon said while it was possible such a duty would impose costs, those were outweighed by the economic impact of losing the industry.
So a defendant will put it up as a straw man of a floodgates argument, but a proper policy argument will say it is better to have a cautious regulator that spends $1 now to save $1 million later than the other way round.
A lawyer for kiwi fruit growers, Davy Salmon. A child is in a critical condition after being hit by a ute towing a trailer in Palmerston North. Emergency services were called to the Highbury Avenue shortly after 3 o'clock this afternoon. The police say the child was crossing the road at the time. A series of power glitches in Hawke's Bay this morning has now been attributed to an accident involving a lawn mowing contractor. The problems began with 2 short blackouts for 5,000 customers in Hastings just after 7 o'clock. There were subsequent brownouts in Napier because of diminished voltage. The line's company Unison says the contractor struck a fence beside a 33 kilovolt line, sending a piece of wire spinning into the air where it struck one of the main cables. And it is just coming up to 6:06 to sport, and the 54 Test veteran Julian Savea has been dropped from the All Blacks squad for this year's Rugby Championships. The selectors have opted for Rieko Ioane, Waisaki Naholo and Nehi Milner-Skudder as the obvious wingers. Coach Steve Hansen says it's a tough time for Savea, but he expects to see him back.
Sure, he won't have finished his time in the jersey. He's still a very good rugby player and there's a lot left in him going forward. And the other guy who seems to be always unlucky not to get named is Matty Todd. He's an outstanding rugby player, but unfortunately we can only fit 2 open-side flankers into the squad.
Steve Hansen. New Zealand's latest world title holder, shot-putter Tom Walsh, is looking for a bit of rest and recreation after his win in London this morning. He's taking a break with his girlfriend in England for the next week before heading back into the competition on the Diamond League circuit. The New Zealand under-21 shooter Monica Faulkner and Pulse mid-quarter Whitney Souness are the rookies named in the Silver Ferns squad for the upcoming Quad Netball Series. Tactics defender Temalisi Whakahokotau has also been recalled. 21-year-old Faulkner says it's been a rocket ride into the squad.
It's been 0 from 100. I played Beko last year and this is my first ANZ season and now I'm in the Silver Ferns, so yeah, it's just gone really fast.
The new Silver Fern, Monica Faulkner, and that's the news.
This week on Night's Passchendaele, a disaster for New Zealand but a turning point for 20th century nursing, Christine Hallett explains, which will go nicely with the fostering of world peace through travel. Richard Ivan Jobs on the post-war youth hostel movement. Alexandra McKinnon on alcohol and space. Turns out there's not a dry zone in the cosmos, and we have a sonic tonic dedicated to the songs and sound bites of Scandinavia on Nights This Week with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northlands, scattered rain, clearing this evening but returning tomorrow afternoon. Auckland and Coromandel, cloudy periods with patchy rain this evening, the odd shower tomorrow. Waikato to Taranaki, also Bay of Plenty in the central high country, cloud increasing, patchy drizzle developing tonight, especially about high ground. Whanganui to Wellington, fine today, cloudy tomorrow with a few showers. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine but high cloud increasing tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine with increasing high cloud. However, scattered rain developing tomorrow afternoon or evening with heavy falls about northwest Nelson. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain in Fiordland this afternoon and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon with heavy falls. Southland, the odd shower turning to rain tomorrow afternoon, and the Chatham Islands, fine spells with any remaining showers clearing this evening. And that's news and weather.
Thank you, Rowan Quinn. Stolen from the newsroom because there's a sickness in the news reading department, and lo and behold, when Rowan was filling in, breaking news at bang on 6 o'clock. 2 Green MPs are threatening to resign if Materia Tudei does not quit as co-leader. Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon say her position on benefit fraud means she's no longer eligible to be fit. She's no longer fit to be co-leader and she must stand down immediately. Our political reporter, May Heron, I think. Have we got May, are you there?
Hi, John. Yes, I'm here.
So this is most bizarre. What's going on? Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon are saying what?
So they're basically saying that they can't support someone or they can't have a co-leader that they say, well, that lied to a public agency. They say they don't believe in that and they can't stand behind a co-leader that does. Now, you'll remember that not long ago, I think last month, Materia Tudei admitted lying to work and income in the 1990s to try and get more money. And they say that. And more than that, her continuing, I guess, stance that was okay, that has made them decide that if Materia Tudei does not quit, that they will step aside. Now, in terms of their positions, so David Clendon is currently number 16 on the list, and Kennedy Graham is number 8. So they say if Materia Tudei does not step aside, that they will withdraw themselves as candidates and take themselves off the party list.
Okay, so this is this a principal position? Is it job protection? In other words, do they think that what we've learnt about Materia Tudei 2 decades ago is impacting on the Greens' chances and therefore they want to try and protect something at the election? Or are they saying, no, actually we have an objection to this as a point of principle? Do you know, May?
I mean, from what we've heard, it seems like a very much a principled stance. They say, this is what they say moral theory justifies civil obedience on occasion, but this is limited to the breach of the most fundamental human rights, such as torture, but it doesn't stretch to income benefits. So for them, it's very much a moral stance. So they believe morally they cannot stand behind a co-leader. Now, I've talked to someone from within the party. They have said that this is 2 disgruntled MPs. They are just grandstanding. They have done next to no campaigning for the Green Party so far, and that there were discussions that they were going to quit anyway. So it seems like that Materia Tudei won't be standing aside here, but we obviously haven't heard from her herself.
Okay, so no response from the Green Party co-leader thus far?
Not yet. We're making attempts right now to contact her, so we'll obviously update all our news and bulletins as soon as we have that. May
Heron, our political reporter, thank you so much. So this is just breaking. We too, our gallery team are making calls, and we too are making calls from our office just behind the studio. So what we can say is that Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon basically say, if she doesn't go, we do. We will try and talk to Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon and also, of course, get a response from Materia Tudei herself between now and 6:30, which is 18 minutes away. The Prime Minister, Bill English, is not denying claims. He sent hundreds of text messages to a former staffer who quit after a dispute with National MP Todd Barclay. Glenys Dixon left last year after allegations Mr Barclay secretly recorded their conversations. Todd Barclay has since announced he will step down at the election. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters last week accused Mr English of sending Ms Dixon 450 texts in the year leading up to her resignation. At his post-cabinet media conference this afternoon, the Prime Minister repeatedly dodged questions about the claim.
I think everything that can be said about that matter has been said, and I don't have any further comment about that. I just can't comment on that. All commentary that can be made on that's been made. I think, as I said, this has all been covered. It's subject to another police investigation. I can't comment on it, particularly given that they're subject to further police investigation.
Bill English wouldn't confirm he sent the text messages and says he doesn't know who gave them to Winston Peters, but he also declined to discount the allegations. Mr English was quizzed about the volume of messages. Did he send 22 texts to Glenys Dixon the day before she resigned and another 25 the week after? While he wouldn't answer, he admitted he sometimes texted people at around 1 in the morning if he could not get hold of them.
Well, look, I'm in communication with a lot of people all the time, ranging from family members to people I used to work with to people I'm working with now. I don't count up who's texted what where. I just communicate effectively to achieve what I want to achieve.
Bill English talking at his post-cabinet media conference earlier this afternoon. Mr English has previously maintained he wasn't involved in the dispute, and today he said he stood by all the comments he'd made publicly and to the police that he didn't know about the nature of the employment settlement. 2 orthopaedic surgeons have written an open letter to the Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, calling for him to walk in their shoes as the southern DHB crisis escalates. The surgeons were incensed by the Minister's words, or some of them, in his interview here with us on Checkpoint on Friday night, arguing the hospital is not a court case and the urology department is not toxic. Lots of other talking points from the interview with the Minister. Drs Simon McMahon and David Gwyn-Jones say the DHB's financial situation is so dire, 370 patients needing knee replacements have been sent back to their GPs over the past 2 years to keep the department compliant with government targets. David Gwyn-Jones told our health correspondent, Karen Brown, the Minister was disrespectful to staff in his Checkpoint interview.
A number of us were extremely upset by the comments. He'd failed to front for several previous days, and then he's come out and said that the hospital's a court case and the department's toxic. And I think it shows he's really rather out of touch with what's really happening in the place. We're all working as hard as we possibly can to do the best for our patients, and we don't feel that comments like that coming from the Minister are helpful.
You also want to look at the population-based funding formula. You say it's just basically you're getting more than some other places, but you don't seem to be able to make the money stretch.
Well, look, I think this has been ongoing for a number of years, and nobody understands the population funding formula. It's secret. It's not validated. And a number of different consultants have come down to try and sort out where all the money's going. And frankly, we don't know, but there's clearly not enough coming to the surgical departments and many other departments in the hospital. And we know that in other places around the country, they don't seem to have these same problems. So there's some problem. We don't know what it is, but we suspect that the future funding pathway and the current system for trying to allocate resources can't be right when we see the level of need in our district and the problems we have with treating our patients.
You also say in the letter that unfortunately the intensive care unit, the cardiac surgery and urology, they're just the tip of the iceberg, and that if something's not done there could be a lot more bad news to come from Dunedin Hospital. Can you tell us what you're suggesting there? I mean, what is going to happen next?
Well, I feel a great deal of sympathy for the urologists. And they're talking about 10 patients who've waited 7 months for further surgery or investigations of their prostate cancer, which is obviously something which can't be just returned to GP because of the diagnosis. But in orthopaedics, we've been returning over 30% of patients, 370 patients over 2 years who need hip and knee replacements, and they're being returned to their GP to keep us compliant with the government targets. And, that's a huge number of very disabled patients that aren't getting their surgery. But because they're not cancer and because they don't appear as breaches, then it doesn't appear to be a problem. But for those patients, it's a huge problem.
So, I mean, we've obviously seen the problems with eyes. You've just talked about the problems with orthopaedics, which we've known about for some time. Now, urology, I mean, what else is to come?
Well, I think all of our services are under pressure, and each of them will be trying to deal with those pressures in different ways. So it's either by not doing cases or not being able to see patients in the first place to even put them on the list. There's a huge unmet demand in our region and in many other regions around the country. and I think these stories are going to get more and more common.
Do you think that Southern needs a special approach because of the challenges that you've outlined in this letter? An older population, a very far-flung population, and so on. I mean, the funding formula's not cutting it, is it? I mean, what's needed?
I don't know what's needed. I think the funding formula needs to be looked at. If there are areas of waste or, benchmarked against other areas and you can see there's a clear difference, if the money is going to community care rather than to the hospital, that may explain it. But I think it needs a very close look. And anybody who has come down here has been amazed at the need but can't fully explain why we don't seem to have enough for what we need to do. I can't answer that question. I don't know if the Minister, the Ministry or the Chief Executive can, but this has been a problem that's been ongoing for many years, and it appears to get exacerbated as the sort of various demographic changes are coming through, and the government's future funding pathway seems to, as it's been implemented over the last, 10 years or so.
So what do you want, David? What do you want the Minister to do? He's got to apologise?
I think he has prejudged the results of the urology review by labelling the department toxic. I think that's very disrespectful for the hard-working people within that department. And I think to bag the whole DHB as a cop case is hopeless for morale. It doesn't really help the issue at all. Health funding perhaps should be an election issue. I would like to see that there is equitable distribution of resources so that patients have an equal chance of getting their surgery wherever they live in the country.
It's David Gwynne-Jones, who is an orthopaedic surgeon and one of the two authors of that letter to Health Minister Jonathan Coleman in response to his interview with us here on Checkpoint on Friday night. He was talking to our health correspondent, Karen Brown. Quite extraordinary things unfolding in the Green Party. It's just we're not exactly sure what. Our gallery is telling us that two Green MPs have threatened to resign. They're saying they'll go if Materia Ture doesn't go. That's Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon. The New Zealand Herald are saying they have actually resigned. They have said they will not seek re-election in protest against Materia Ture. We are making calls to Kennedy Graham, to Dave Clendon and to James Shaw and Materia Ture themselves, desperately trying to get some confirmation of what's happening here. Certainly it does appear something is going on. We will update you if any of them take our calls. But our gallery is saying Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon have said they will stand down if she doesn't go, and the New Zealand Herald are reporting that they have stood down. 21 minutes past 6. All of this unfolding as we speak. Kiwi fruit growers are arguing the Ministry for Primary Industries failed to protect them from known biosecurity risks and should never have let the vine-killing disease PSA slip into the country. A group of 212 growers are suing MPI for negligence at the High Court in Wellington. The Ministry is expected to argue it's immune from being sued if it's carrying out its tasks under the Biosecurity Acts. Our reporter Michael Kropp was in court.
The growers accuse MPI of failing in its duty of care when in 2009 it gave biosecurity clearance to contaminated kiwi fruit material from China, thinking it was only pollen. Their lawyer, Davy Salmon, began by telling the court that MPI, or MAF as it was then known, plays a crucial role in protecting both agriculture and the environment from disease.
Biosecurity, in MAF's own words, is more important to New Zealand than any other developed country. And it has been described by the defendant again as, quote, fundamental to New Zealand's economic health and natural heritage.
Mr Salmon is trying to prove that MPI owed a duty of care to the kiwi fruit growers, whose industry was worth about $1.2 billion each year. He said the destructive PSA vine disease was well known and worth protecting against. He told the court MPI had wrongly concluded kiwi fruit pollen could not carry the infection. He described those findings as inaccurate and at odds with published scientific research. Mr Salmon said a more thorough risk analysis, including consultation with the industry, would have quickly fixed that.
Among other things, MPI and its staff members negligently failed to consider and understand, one, that commercially milled pollen contains plant parts and was therefore at risk of contamination regardless of what was thought about pollen.
Mr Salmon explained that the virus's ground zero was an orchard in Te Puke, from where its spread was inevitable. He said it came in on contaminated kiwi fruit material from Shaanxi province in China. The accompanying documentation, which didn't match the import licence, said the 4.5 kilogram package contained kiwi fruit pollen. In reality, the bulk of it was pollen anthers, a prohibited plant material, and just 45 grams or so was pollen. He argued if MPI had checked the shipment properly, the disease would never have got into the country.
Because that left the inspection officer with no room to move on looking inside, but also would have immediately identified that there were anthers there, and depending on the level of microscopic magnification, whether it's electron or not, would have found PSA.
Mr Salmon said MPI had a duty to the growers, even if protecting them came at a cost. The case is set down for 12 weeks and the Crown's opening will be heard about halfway through. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Carmichael Cropperho.
Right, our gallery has just confirmed 2 Green MPs are quitting after Materia Ture refused to step down as co-leader. Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon have withdrawn from the party's list at the upcoming election. We have called Kennedy Graham, we've called Dave Clendon, we've called Materia Ture, we've called Gareth Hughes, we've called Eugenie Sage, and we've called co-leader James Shaw, and none of them, perhaps not surprisingly, given that the proverbial seems to be hitting the fan as we speak, are taking our calls. But our gallery has confirmed 2 Green MPs are quitting. Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon have withdrawn from the party's list for the upcoming election. Both of them, Dave Clendon in particular, quite low on the list, but they are standing down. In fact, Dave Clendon was in the margins given current polling. This is absolutely unfolding as we go to air, and we can't get anyone to talk to us on the record about it. It's 25 minutes past 6. The government has had a change of heart and is reconsidering setting a target for reducing suicide rates. More than 500 people commit suicide in New Zealand each year, way more than the road toll. And this country's youth suicide rate is the highest in the developed world. Mental health advocates and the Labour Party have welcomed the about-face, but the Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, warns there's no magic wand for tackling this very big problem. Here's our political reporter, Benedict Collins.
When the government decided not to bring in a target for reducing the suicide rate in April, it was blasted as cynical and deeply flawed by those who work in the sector. Its targetless suicide prevention policy was called an arse-covering exercise by mental health advocate Mike King, who quit a government panel in protest. But now, after meeting with experts, the Health Minister Jonathan Coleman says he accepts there could be benefits in setting a target.
And the point they made is actually setting targets changes the culture within a mental health workforce. It galvanises society around, focusing on what you can do to intervene with this problem. And my point has always been, look, there's got to be a whole of society effort. And so it does seem that setting a goal, and it may be aspirational, but that doesn't matter, actually just focuses efforts.
But Dr Coleman says while the government will take another look at bringing in a target, it won't reduce the suicide rate by itself.
It's families, sports clubs, schools, looking after your mates. Yes, the government has an input, but there's not a magic wand on this stuff. It needs increased awareness. It needs people to be on the lookout.
The Chief Executive of the Mental Health Foundation, Sean Robinson, says a target would be a great move.
Setting a target for reducing deaths by suicide galvanises action. It becomes, very much a courageous decision to say, yes, we are going to make a difference here. And it's really a very positive decision to say there are things we can do.
He says a target to cut suicide by 20% in the next 10 years would be realistic.
That's in line with the World Health Organisation's recommendations. It's in line with the sort of target that Scotland set, and Scotland came very close to achieving that. I think they achieved an 18% reduction within the time they set themselves. I mean, of course, we'd all like to set a target of 0 deaths by suicide, but that must be the ultimate goal.
And Labour's health spokesperson David Clark welcomed the U-turn, saying it's a good first step.
Having a target is a good way to track progress. If you really are focused on reducing suicide, and we should be as a country because our figures are disgraceful, we need to know whether we're succeeding or failing, and we need to hold governments to account for the action or inaction they take.
Last month, the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor asked the government to do more to ensure children can cope with stress in order to reduce the youth suicide rate, which is twice as bad as America's and almost 5 times worse than Britain's rate. Last year, 579 people committed suicide in New Zealand. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
It's 28 minutes past 6. We're just waiting to find out if anyone is going to talk to us. Quite an extraordinary state of affairs. So 2 Green MPs are threatening to resign if Materia Ture does, well, in fact, they have resigned. Sorry, that is now obsolete, such as politics in New Zealand at the moment. They have resigned. So Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon say that Materia Ture's position on benefit fraud means she is no longer fit to be co-leader and she must stand down immediately. She has said she is not going to do so. They have declared, therefore, that they will not be standing for the Greens at the upcoming election, which is, of course, at the end of September. There does seem to be real chaos in the Green Party. People seem to have been caught entirely unawares by this. We're trying to get formal comment from either of the co-leaders, Materia Ture or James Shaw, but they're not taking our calls. I think actually they're taking stock and trying to work out exactly what is going on. All of this has just started breaking in the last half hour. Also, obviously, Morning Report will have full coverage tomorrow once someone is talking. We're going to end tonight with the rather stirring pictures or audio, if you are listening, of the Auckland Grammar, the full school, doing a haka to farewell their former principal, former All Black, and a man who really gave a damn about education, Sir John Graham.
RNZ News headlines. I'm Catriona McLeod. 2 Green MPs are quitting after their co-leader Materia Ture refused to step down. Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon say she's not fit to be the co-leader, and half an hour ago they announced that either she goes or they would leave. The Health Minister has been called on to apologise for critical remarks about Dunedin Hospital's urology department. Kiwi fruit growers say the government let in the vine-killing bacterial disease PSA by ignoring published scientific research. And an 18-year-old woman has been charged with murder after a woman died at an Avonhead property on Saturday night. Our next news and weather is at 7.
The RNZ app has had a makeover. Now you can find all the latest news and current events, listen live to all our stations, easily find programs and podcasts,